In 1492, Christopher Columbus landed in the Americas and changed history forever. But here's what they don't teach you in school. He was 71 years late. In 1421, a massive Chinese fleet, over 300 ships carrying 28,000 men, set sail from the Forbidden City under the command of Admiral Zheng He. Their mission? To map the entire world and bring distant lands under Chinese influence. And according to controversial but compelling evidence, they made it to America. Decades before Columbus, decades before any European even knew the Pacific Ocean existed. Now, most historians dispute this. They say there's not enough proof, that the timeline doesn't add up, that it's just speculation. But what if they're wrong? What if Chinese ships didn't just reach America? What if they colonized it? What if, instead of Spanish conquistadors destroying the Aztec Empire, Chinese diplomats negotiated trade routes with them? What if the dominant culture in the Americas today wasn't European, but East Asian? What if you walked through New York City and every street sign was in Mandarin? This isn't fantasy. It's a timeline that was within reach. One storm, one emperor's decision, one shift in policy, and this is the world we'd be living in. So let's rewind to 1421 and see how it all could have unfolded. Let me tell you about the most powerful navy the world had ever seen. The year is 1421, while Europe is still recovering from the Black Death and squabbling over feudal territories. China is experiencing the height of the Ming Dynasty. Emperor Yongle has built the Forbidden City, the Grand Canal, the largest ocean-going fleet in human history. And commanding that fleet is Admiral Zheng He, Muslim eunuch who stands nearly 7 feet tall and commands respect across 3 oceans. Zheng He's treasure ships are massive. We're talking vessels over 400 feet long. To put that in perspective, Columbus's Santa Maria was only 85 feet. These Chinese ships could carry thousands of tons of cargo, hundreds of crew members, and enough supplies for months at sea. Between 1405 and 1433, Zheng He makes 7 voyages across the known world. He reaches East Africa, India, the Arabian Peninsula. He brings back giraffes, which the Chinese think are mythical killing. He establishes trade routes. He projects Chinese power across the Indian Ocean. But here's where our timeline diverges. In our world, in 1424, Emperor Yongle dies. His successor decides that these expensive naval expeditions are a waste of resources. China turns inward. The treasure fleet is dismantled. The ships rot in harbors. And within a generation, it's illegal to even build ocean-going vessels. China closes itself off from the world for 400 years. But what if Emperor Yongle lived 10 more years? What if his successor shared his vision of Chinese naval dominance? What if in 1421, when Zheng He's fleet sailed east across the Pacific, and there's controversial evidence suggesting they didn't just map the American coastline. They established colonies. Let's say a typhoon blows several ships off course. They end up on the western coast of what we call Mexico. Unlike Columbus, who arrives with 3 small ships and a crew looking to plunder, these Chinese ships arrive with thousands of people, advanced technology, and a mandate to establish diplomatic relations, not conquer. They meet the indigenous peoples of the Pacific coast, and instead of disease, enslavement, and genocide, they negotiate. So what happens when Chinese civilization meets the Americas in 1421? First, let's talk about disease. One of the reasons European contact was so devastating is that Europeans brought smallpox, measles, and other diseases that wiped out up to 90% of indigenous populations. But the Chinese, they've been trading with dozens of different civilizations for centuries. They have stronger immunity profiles. And more importantly, they arrive in smaller, more controlled waves, not massive colonial invasions. Indigenous populations still get sick. There's still a demographic catastrophe, but it's not total annihilation. By 1450, Chinese trading posts dot the Pacific coast from modern-day Alaska to Chile. The Ming Dynasty hasn't colonized in the European since they've established what they do best: tributary relationships. The Aztec Empire in central Mexico? Still intact. But now they're sending jade, cacao, and exotic feathers to Beijing as tribute. Return, they're receiving Chinese steel, gunpowder, and most importantly, written language. Because here's the thing about Chinese civilization. They don't erase cultures. They absorb them, They sinify them. Within 2 generations, Aztec nobles are learning Chinese characters, not to replace their own writing system, but to communicate with the most powerful empire in the world. Chinese merchants are teaching Mesoamericans how to smelt iron, how to build blast furnaces, how to construct ocean-going junks. And the most important exchange? Agriculture. The Chinese bring rice, soybeans, and advanced irrigation techniques to the Americas. The Americans give the Chinese maize, potatoes, tomatoes, and chocolate centuries earlier than in our timeline. By 1500, there are hybrid cities along the Pacific coast where Chinese pagodas stand next to Aztec pyramids, where Mandarin and Nahuatl are both spoken in marketplaces, where Confucian scholars debate philosophy with Aztec priests. And here's the crucial difference from European colonization. The Chinese aren't interested in converting anyone to Christianity. They don't care what gods you worship, as long as you pay tribute and acknowledge Chinese superiority. The Aztec Empire doesn't fall, it adapts. The Inca Empire in South America? By 1480, they've made contact with Chinese traders coming south along the coast. They're trading silver for Chinese silk and gunpowder. And in 1492, when Christopher Columbus sets sail from Spain hoping to reach Asia by going west, he finds a very different America. Imagine Columbus landing in the Caribbean in 1492 and finding Chinese ships already there. In our timeline, Columbus encountered indigenous peoples who had never seen steel weapons, horses or gunpowder. He claimed the land for Spain and started the process of European colonization. But in this timeline, he finds Chinese trading posts, indigenous peoples who've been dealing with foreign traders for 70 years. Caribbean chieftains who speak Mandarin and carry steel weapons. Columbus isn't discovering a new world. He's arriving late to an existing global trade network. He sails back to Spain with shocking news. China got there first. This changes everything. The Spanish don't see the Americas as an empty land waiting to be taken. They see it as contested territory. And they're not just competing with indigenous peoples, they're competing with the most powerful empire on Earth. The 1500s become a race. Spain, Portugal, England, France, they all start sending ships to the Americas. But they're not colonizing virgin territory. They're trying to muscle in on Chinese trade networks. The Treaty of Tordesillas, which in our world divided the Americas between Spain and Portugal. In this timeline, China isn't at the negotiating table, and they don't recognize European claims at all. Conflicts break out. But here's the thing. In the early 1500s, Chinese technology is still superior. Their ships are bigger. Their gunpowder is better. Their supply lines are well established. The Spanish established colonies in the Caribbean, but they can't expand westward because the Pacific coast is under Chinese influence. The Portuguese set up in Brazil, but they're trading with Chinese merchants as much as with indigenous peoples. And the most important development? The indigenous empires survive. The Aztec Empire doesn't fall to Cortez in 1521. Why? Because they have Chinese steel. They have gunpowder. They've seen European tactics in action against Chinese forces. They're not caught off guard. Cortez lands with 600 men expecting to conquer an empire. Instead, he finds himself negotiating with Aztec diplomats who've been trained in Chinese courts and speak 3 languages. The Spanish still establish colonial toeholds. They still bring disease. They still cause immense suffering, but they don't achieve total domination. By 1600, the Americas are a patchwork of competing powers. Indigenous empires along the Pacific coast in alliance with China, Spanish colonies in the Caribbean, and parts of Central America, Portuguese Brazil, and a massive power vacuum in North America that everyone wants to claim. Fast forward to 2025. What does the world look like? Let's start with the Americas. The dominant language on the West Coast isn't Spanish or English. It's Mandarin. From Vancouver to Santiago, cities have Chinese names. Los Angeles is called Luoshanj, which literally means the city of falling mountains. San Francisco is Jujunshan, Old Gold Mountain. The United States as we know it doesn't exist. Instead, there's the Pacific Confederation, a loose alliance of indigenous nations, Chinese-descended populations, and mixed communities that stretches from Alaska to Mexico. Think of it as a more diverse, less centralized version of America. where the dominant cultural influence came from the West, not the East. The East Coast. That's where European colonization succeeded. There's still a United States, but it's limited to the eastern seaboard. It never expanded westward because the West was already claimed. The Midwest, that vast territory between the coasts, it's dominated by indigenous confederations that played European and Chinese powers against each other for 400 years and maintained independence. Mexico? It's the Aztec Federation now. The Spanish never destroyed Tenochtitlan. Today, it's one of the largest cities in the world. Atay, megalopolis with 30 million people where Nahuatl and Mandarin are both official languages. South America looks different too. The Inca Empire survived. Peru is an Andean superpower. The Spanish only control the southern cone, Argentina, Chile, Uruguay. And China? It never closed itself off. It never stagnated. Because in our timeline, China turned inward after the treasure voyages ended. They banned oceanic trade, which made them vulnerable when European powers arrived with gunboats in the 1800s. But in this timeline, China maintained its naval supremacy. When the Industrial Revolution began in Britain in the 1700s, China was already industrializing. They had access to American resources, silver, gold, cotton, timber, centuries earlier than in our world. By 1850, China is the dominant superpower. Not Britain. There's still colonialism, still exploitation, still immense suffering. China isn't morally superior. Power corrupts regardless of culture. But the balance of power is different. World War I doesn't happen the same way because Europe never achieved global dominance. World War II maybe doesn't happen at all because the power dynamics that created fascism in Europe don't exist. The Cold War? It's not between the US and USSR. It's between China and a unified European bloc. And today, in 2025, you'd be watching this video in Mandarin. The global reserve currency would be the yuan. Silicon Valley would be in Jiangsu province. Hollywood? There'd be a Hollywood, but it would be making movies in Cantonese. So is this world better than ours? That's the wrong question. It's different. That's all we can say with certainty. Colonialism happened in this timeline too. Millions still died from disease. Indigenous peoples still lost autonomy, even if they weren't completely destroyed. Power still corrupted. Empires still exploited. But the nature of that exploitation changed. Chinese colonialism operated differently than European colonialism. It was more about tributary relationships than territorial control. More about cultural assimilation than religious conversion. That doesn't make it moral. It just makes it different. And here's the thing that keeps me up at night about alternate history. In 1424, one emperor died. His successor made one decision, and that decision closed China off from the world for 400 years. If he'd chosen differently, if he'd said continue the voyages, instead of destroy the fleet, everything changes. You and I might not exist. Our ancestors might never have met. The entire genetic lottery of human history gets reshuffled. But somewhere, someone else would be making this video in Mandarin, wondering what the world would look like if China had never sailed east, wondering what would have happened if Europe colonized America first. Because in their timeline, that's the alternate history. That's the impossible scenario. That's the world that almost was.